For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and you're listening to this podcast, which is a part of the Inside Carolina Podcast Network. So, first off, thank you for being here. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Inside Carolina wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube so you never miss out on any of the content the team at IC puts out. It helps us out a ton, and it hardly takes any of time. Speaking of support, we want to support the people that support us. So that's why I've got to remind everybody about Jimmy's Famous Seafood. The reason they wanted to sponsor this podcast is simple. They're owned and operated by Carolina fans. So not only do you get great seafood at a great price, you're also supporting one of your own. It's a true win-win. For everybody wondering, my go-to order is the Famous Gift Box, where you get 2 massive crab cakes, 2 kinds of crab soup, and a half pint of crab dip. Visit them online at jimmysfamousseafood.com, and at checkout, use the promo code hashtag GDTBATH for free 2-day shipping. That's promo code hashtag GDTBATH. All right, today we have a special guest joining me on the podcast. We've got a producer, a filmmaker, Taylor Sharp, who is a Carolina alum. He's created Hoops Africa, Ubuntu Matters, and Hoop Portraits. Taylor, first off, for anybody who's not watching this, you have an elite background. What goes into making an elite background?
Well, we've had a year to practice our background, I feel like, with Zoom. So, I gotta support a couple friends' books. I've got the Muggsy Bogues Game Worn Shoes from
Classics.
Hornets days, some of my favorite books if anyone's trying to have a special eye to see what they should be reading. But no, I've had a year's worth of practice now, so I finally got it in a good spot.
I'm in the process of moving, but every time I see you on Zoom or on one of your calls, I'm always like, once I move, that's the setup I'm going to go for. But just wanted to say thanks for joining me. And I wanted you on today because not only do you have an interesting story, interesting backstory, but it's awesome to see somebody go from super fan to alum to this big time producer now. You grew up in Western North Carolina. Are you exactly who the motto Tar Heel born, bred, dead is kind of referring to?
Yeah, I am. I haven't hit the dead part yet, but I feel like it'll be the same by then. Yeah, I mean, I grew up just obsessed with Carolina. Carolina athletics. I feel like I knew about UNC and knew I wanted to be a Tar Heel long before I even started thinking about university. So it was a pleasant surprise once I got through school and I started to think about college that UNC was such a great option to go to school too. It was such a great public university. So my worlds kind of collided there of like the young fandom obsessed with UNC athletics turned into academically oriented and wanted to go to UNC as a student too. So yeah, Tar Heel born, Tar Heel bred definitely fits. And one day Tar Heel did.
What are some of your earliest Tar Heel memories from your fandom?
I mean, I feel like I was the kid at school who everyone was ready to talk junk to if they were a Duke fan or a State fan. I mean, growing up in North Carolina, I mean, it is, as they say, like the ACC tournament comes around and out rolls the TVs into the room to watch. So it's a big part of my identity. I grew up playing sports and I grew up loving UNC athletics. But really, I feel like my actual connection to UNC began in 2005 when my oldest brother, I have 2 older brothers, when my oldest brother came to Carolina, it gave my parents the perfect excuse to get football season tickets. Which was awesome for me because that meant, 6 weekends out of the year we were going down. They wanted to see Josh. I wanted to see Josh, but of course also see UNC play football. So that's when I really got the fast pass to being, I kind of felt like I had started my Carolina career as a young kid because from 2005 to 2012, both my older brothers were there. So by the time I rolled around, I felt like I already knew everything about campus.
I love it because you're not somebody who was just a Carolina basketball fan. You loved Carolina football just as much, maybe even more, seeing how your family had those season tickets and counting your college years. You were front row in the tunnel at Kenan Stadium for almost 10 years. What are some of the best memories you have in Kenan Stadium, and how would you kind of describe to people what it was like just walking into Kenan Stadium? It's football in a forest, as Lee Pace kind of describes it.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up living for that. I would just love a weekend when we go to Chapel Hill, and I'd be there at the old well walk back in the day when I was like a young kid in middle school. I'd be getting autographs. We'd go to the game, and then I'd ditch my family. They had great season tickets and all, but I would go to the tunnel because before then, the student section wasn't there. Like what is known as the tar pit now, didn't happen until a couple years before we got there, Vip. So like back then it was kind of empty bleachers sometimes down there, right low underneath the field goal post by the tunnel. So me and a friend who would come with me to the games would go there. And it was only a few years later, once they moved the tar pit, and then I was kind of worried, like, oh gosh, these students are going to get my spot. But fortunately, there were some good friends I made who were students who I like sat with all 4 years because they did the same thing, and they would save my spot because occasionally the students would get let in their gate a little bit prior to like the general admission gates or whatever. So if that happened, they would save me a spot, and they were actually that was like I think it was Kendrick Burney's sister and her friend group who was like really good friends with Denoris Cersei and Johnny White. So by nature of me like being friends with them, those guys would always come over and like see us before the tunnel, which was like fun for me as a young fan. But there were so many good games. I mean, I started with the Bunning years. I saw the Butch years. We had the Everett year. Fedora. I've like seen it all the way through now to Mac. But in those early years when I was like really really into it, we had some great games. Like that Yukon game when the lights went out and they played Kung Fu Fighting and we did the wave. I mean, that was a blast. Just some of those like early games too. We started to like bring out the Navy jerseys and went under the lights. And I don't know, I think I got to see like the stepping stones of the program getting back to where it is. And that's like all now coming into fruition now.
And this was before the Twitter and the Instagram days. And as I understand it, you kind of took up photography on the side and you started taking pictures of players, and they would love it and post it on their Facebooks and wherever they could post it. So how did that kind of come about, and who did you kind of become friendly with through that?
Yeah, well, long before I thought about sports photography or videography and like documentary filmmaking and stuff, I did like having a camera in my hand and I did like capturing moments. So at some point, I got a DSLR camera and I would take it to games with me. So I didn't have a field pass, I didn't have a credential, but front row of the tunnel, you're like pretty much right there. You've got a pretty similar vantage. So I started taking photos and then putting them up on a Facebook album, and I had like gotten to know all these players, and they were friends with me on Facebook, like you said, before IG and Twitter. So yeah, I was getting, I mean, I wasn't that great, but I was pretty good, and I would post it, the day after the game. So it was always funny to see, even like in the later years, some of the guys that we became friends with because we overlapped with, like I remember Ebron when he was a freshman before he was getting big play time would like come and grab my photos. And then of course, we get to campus and we have similar friend groups and we become friends. So it's funny to look back on that now. But I think that was where I was kind of like honing in on my, or starting to at least like photography at those football games was kind of getting me thinking about documenting sports in particular. But I just did it for fun. And it was fun to have an interaction with those guys. I mean, at the time I was such a big fan. So it's, as everyone listening knows, that's a fun interaction to have. But then once I got to school, you and me and our friend group, that was just kind of our world. Those were our peers, our classmates, our friends, our roommates. So then I got to take on like a whole new level of, I probably cared less from like a fan standpoint, but I cared a lot more as a friend, and so that actually like took me to whole new levels of like enjoying the Carolina athletics experience while in school, because it wasn't just like pulling for my team to win. It was like pulling for my friends, and you see how much hard work goes into that, and how much it could mean for them if they're trying to go pro. And you're looking around at like your friends who I had a good group who would go with me to basketball games and football games and sit front row, and like all these guys that it was so much fun. Like that was a big part of our friend group identity. So a win meant we were having fun and we were going out and having a big party that night. So it was kind of fun to transition from like young kid fan into like a little bit older high school, becoming friends with the players, and then in college just getting to view it from a totally new lens, feeling like very much a part of it.
Going back to that young high school age, unfortunately, your mom passed away back in 2010 from ovarian cancer. And I know players reached out to you and did special stuff for you when that happened. What can you tell us about that and the relationships that you formed with some of those guys?
Yeah, that was really nice of them. And I think that's something beautiful about like the community that sports can provide. Yeah, I mean, I remember one time it was like maybe a spring game type thing, and this would have been earlier before she passed, but my mom had like the cancer had come back. She had like remission multiple times. So like my middle school through high school years were was the cancer was a big part of it. And I remember going one time and like instead of getting autographs, I like had a lot of the players and Butch like sign a card for my mom because she was like back home and sick. And at the time, Butch had cancer as well. He had just gone through chemotherapy for, I can't remember what type of cancer he had. So he wrote a really sweet message, and a lot of the other guys like Kendrick Burney and Donta Williams, like these guys that that class of players who knew me from being at the tunnel every game, like wondering who this guy is. They were really sweet. And since we were friends on Facebook, I think they saw what happened. And I would have gone to every game. Like that was December of 2010 when she passed. And I think it was like it was the Music City Bowl in Nashville. I usually would have been there, but I wasn't there because my mom, it was like her last days. And Kendrick Burney was so nice to like reach out, say like, I'm going to leave it all on the field for you. And later on, like years later, he actually gave me the jersey like from that game and signed it to me and stuff. So that was just a really sweet thing, for them to do. And for me, I think, two little things like being a 11-year-old, mom was diagnosed to 16 when she passed. A couple escapes for me were like UNC athletics, going to football games in the weekends, and also fly fishing in the mountains. Those were like my two things that as a kid kind of got me away from it all. So yeah, the UNC athletics was a big part of that. Football, especially, like, Michael Beal, who's still at UNC. I remember he where he works for the athletics department. And at some point, even though I wasn't in school, they picked me to run out the flag in front of the team. So I was a high schooler running out the flag in front of the team in the tunnel. When they started the tar pit, they actually asked me to do that a couple times in college too. I felt like a veteran then. But
were there any nerves the first time running out with the flag?
Oh, no, first time, yeah. First time for sure. Well, first of all, I like have braces. I'm in high school. I'm like,
was it a little heavier than you expected?
A little, I mean, the one thing I just didn't want to do is trip. That's the obvious thing, because I'm out there like, 50 feet in front of the tunnel. I don't know if you ever saw it, even noticed with all the smoke you running out of it, but like, you're positioned a little bit in front of them, but then at a certain point you kind of start it and you go and you gotta make sure they don't catch up with you. So yeah, first time, a little bit of nerves, but crushed it. They asked me back to do it a few more times. I was there. So every now and then Mike would be like, you want to do it? So yeah, that was funny. By the time that I did it, I think the last time I did it was what year was that? The 0 Dark 30 game against Miami.
That was 2013. Sophomore year.
Yeah, they asked me to do it again, but by that time I was tailgating before the game, so it's totally different type of nerves. But I was confident. I was experienced then.
That was actually, I was going to mention this when you talked about coming out of the tunnel and having that experience for the first time. When I walked onto the team my sophomore year, that was the first game I was allowed to dress out for. And I remember being in the tunnel the first time and everybody's banging on the top of it. And it's like so loud. And it was a Thursday night game, sold out crowd. And I remember in the tunnel just thinking like, don't faint. Like, you're very close to fainting right now, taking steps going out of the tunnel. Like, do not faint. Don't be the guy who's walking out of the tunnel and just passes out early. But it's crazy to hear that we kind of had experiences from that same game.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm 20 yards in advance, pumped up, ready to go. Like, I've been here, done that.
But it is great to hear kind of your story with the former players like Denoris Cersei and hearing how those guys were more than kind of just athletes. And you mentioned the fly fishing, and in your mom's memory, you created Casting for Hope, where you put on a fly fishing tournament. How can listeners get involved with that or help out if they're listening to this and they want to help out?
Yeah. So Casting for Hope, we've been at it now for 10 years. This past December was the 10th anniversary of my mom's passing. And so we got that started in high school. Like the spring after she passed, I partnered up with my English teacher in high school, actually. And we put on this charity fly fishing event, like a competitive tournament that raised money for a cancer clinic in Asheville, the Hope Cancer Center. And it started there as like a one-off tournament in April, but we got really into the competitive fly fishing circuit. And they promoted us to a gold level event, the only one on the East Coast, modeled after the World Championships of Fly Fishing. So all of a sudden now we're like running one of the biggest competitive fly fishing events in the country, and Team USA is coming, and Team USA Youth is there like training. And so that was kind of beyond our dreams of what Casting for Hope was going to be. It went from a senior project in high school to this full-fledged 501c3 nonprofit. And now we financially and emotionally assist women with ovarian and gynecological cancers. So we pay off hospital debt. We put tires on people's cars so they can get to treatment. We'll put them up in hotels if they have like a couple days worth of appointments they need to be there for. We pay prescriptions that, maybe insurance doesn't. But the big thing is that we also take women and their caregivers, whether that's a partner or a sister or a friend or a son, daughter, who's been a part of their cancer journey with them. We take them up to the mountains to our retreat center where we give them a weekend away from the clinical setting. They get to meet other people who are going through the same things they're going through. They do some meditation, some yoga, but we teach them to fly fish too. We get them in the stream. And so that's been something we've been doing now for 10 years. And if people do want to support, they can go to castingforhope.org. We just had our big April tournament, our 10th annual April event, which is our biggest event, but we do stuff throughout the year. It's based in Morganton, where I'm from, but we operate in all 100 North Carolina counties. So also, like, support us, please, donate if you can, but also if anyone listening knows someone with gynecological cancer who might need financial assistance, like, have them apply so we can help them out. Or even if it's not a financial thing, if they're just a survivor at any point after a diagnosis and they could benefit from a retreat weekend away, meeting other people who have gone through the same thing, put us in touch too, because anyone's eligible for that. So and we've had some cool North Carolina connections through the years, like UNC connections through Casting for Hope. Actually, so I did it that first spring of my senior year, and that was around the same time that I had been accepted to UNC and got the Morehead Cain scholarship. And someone at the Morehead Foundation told me they knew I was interested in working for Coach Williams basketball camp. I was going to be doing that right after graduation. And they told me of this alum who lives in Asheville who used to work for Coach Smith. He was a manager, and he was actually roommates with MJ. His name's David Hart. And he lived with MJ for a year. And they said, he's into fly fishing. You should get in touch with him. So before I went to Coach Williams camp, I was like trying to get in touch with them, and I didn't hear back from them. But then all of a sudden I'm at the registration table at our event, and I look down and I see David Hart, and I look up and it's the same guy. And David and I have forged this amazing bond, kind of funny. We both had this UNC basketball connection, both lived with players, both from Western North Carolina, and both into fly fishing. So David, we swap stories. It's kind of funny. Every April tournament Casting for Hope puts on, it's usually right after the season. So it's like David and I come in there ready for the event, and we just like talk UNC hoops. We got to get it all out. We know we're gonna have our little debrief session that second weekend of April every year. But that's been a cool UNC connection that's really prevalent throughout the Casting for Hope April event.
Definitely recommend everybody checking that out. What was it like then working Coach Williams camp? Do you have any stories kind of from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I graduated, and then the very next day, my friends were packing up the cars with beach chairs and beer and whatever, going to beach week, and I was going to Coach Williams basketball camp. I was going to Chapel Hill to work, and the way you do it is, I was working dorm staff, so I was there with the campers, looking after them, keeping them on schedule. We were in the gym, really just corralling kids. But what was so much fun about it was that we lived in Granville. Everyone, all the campers and the counselors and managers and stuff were there. And Carolina basketball family, as we all know, is so tight. But managers of years past, now adults come back and do this camp. It's not just the varsity managers, it's the JV managers. So there's this big group of people who are working the camp who are all affiliated with UNC basketball in some way, usually. And when all the campers were asleep at midnight, we'd go out to that court at Granville and pick up basketball for hours and jump in the pool and go to timeout and get biscuits and stuff. So that was really fun for me, because that's when I became really good friends with a lot of the managers who I'd become friends with or be friends with my whole 4 years and after. And so many of us are working in basketball in different capacities now. So those were some good memories. And then also just watching the pickup games. There are just some great games in there where you've got David Noel and Jawad Williams and all these, older guys back playing with PJ Harrison at the time and James Michael McAdoo and this crew. So there's some great pickup games, all those Dean Dome summer games I'd heard about my whole life. That was my first time seeing those. And that was my first time getting to know a lot of the managers and staff and players.
During college, you come to UNC as a Morehead Cain scholar. Then while you're there, it just keeps picking up. You become roommates with Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson. How did you first meet those two your freshman year? And then how did you get so close to the point where you're living together? Because that experience has to be extremely different than the typical UNC student.
Well, that's a funny story. Yeah, so I didn't meet them actually at camp. They reported for summer session 2. I think, and I was just there for session one. So I met some of their teammates and managers and staff and stuff, but I didn't know them quite yet. I think it was actually like that first night, a convocation or something, or that like first night um when we all go to Carmichael there and do that little, like, I don't know, kick off the
The
school
orient, yeah,
like
I
kind
know
of
what you're talking
thing.
about. The
Yeah.
freshman day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was actually Thomas. Tom. I think like they put out like a "What's going on tonight" type thing on Twitter. And Thomas responded, and we actually met up though and had a really fun night. And then at that point, we had mutual friends already through basketball program and through staff. And Bryce had also lost his mom in high school, so like he and I bonded pretty quickly over that. And Marcus and I were just like pretty similar people. And then I lived in Horton, which was like right by Rams Head where they lived. So they're at Rams Village. So they were like just down the street from me. The closest dorm or apartment to mine was there. So like we realized we were kind of neighbors. And then Marcus and I walk into Spanish class, then like our very first college class, and we had the same class together. So of course we're sitting together. So they just like very naturally became friends with me, just like anyone else, just like you or any of our other crew of friends. You just start to hang out, and they would come over and play video games and go to Rams dining hall for late night. And I think I give credit to Marcus and Bryce and Joel and JP too. Like our class had a lot of friends outside of the basketball program, and they kind of lived this dual life of like basketball star and just normal college kid, especially Marcus. So they just became a part of our friend group and would come over to watch a big NBA game or to play 2K or whatever. So after those first 2 years, when they were allowed to move off campus and I was like moving out of the dorms, yeah, we just decided we wanted to live together. So that it like felt very normal for me the whole time. They're just like any other of my friends, but definitely provided a unique experience. Like the childhood version of me was probably pretty pumped up about it, but the college version of me was like, this just feels normal.
Yeah, going back to like that freshman year and kind of seeing the dynamic between the basketball players and just the campus, like we would be in the dining hall and like I would be going up to get like pizza or something, and I would come back to Marcus at the table, and there would just be like a line of like 10 people waiting to try to take a picture. I'm like, I don't know how you guys do it. So obviously you were there and saw everything kind of going on. I have to ask, who was the messier roommate?
Oh gosh,
You got to put somebody on blast here.
Marcus.
Marcus was.
I'm putting
Wow.
I'm putting Marcus on that. I think. Yeah, I think he would agree with that. But they were both good roommates, honestly. They were great roommates. I don't have too much beef with them about living conditions.
For some reason, I just remember Bryce's room just being like boxes and boxes of Jordans just
Bryce
everywhere.
had a lot of shoes. Bryce had more shoes. So maybe he had a little bit more of a cluttered life, but Bryce has a little bit of organization to him. Marcus, speaking of shoes, Marcus and I like wore similar enough sizes to where like, we might have been stealing shoes from one another every now and then. Like I still remember a time when I let him borrow a pair of shoes, or I couldn't find a pair of shoes. This was at like the end of junior year. I couldn't find. There's like a nice pair of Cole Haans. I like them, and couldn't find those shoes. Like what did I do with those shoes? And then we didn't live together senior year, just junior year. So that's like junior spring. I lost the shoes. I go off to like work at the NBA that summer in New York. I was gonna bring those shoes, but don't have the shoes. And then like there's this random fall day where like Marcus and I just happen to pass each other on campus, and he's sitting there, he's wearing my shoes. So that's the beef I have with Marcus. Maybe is like he probably still has those Cole Haans, but I'm sure I have a couple pair of his Jordans. So it all worked out in the end.
What would you say the coolest experience you had through that friendship was?
Mm. I mean, I'll give two answers. On one hand, it's just like those are just some of my best relationships I got from college. We all come into Chapel Hill not knowing many people or not knowing anybody, and you make friends along the way. And some of those last 4 years, some don't. Like some you don't talk too much after college. But those guys are like, I lived with them. They became two of my best buds and a part of a really good larger friend group. And I was like Marcus's wedding was the first time I was a groomsman, for instance. Like that's really special for me. And been able to visit Marcus a couple times in Serbia. And when Bryce was in LA with the Clippers, I was spending a lot of time in LA. Like I'd go out and do meetings for my film stuff I was trying to get going, and I'd stay with Bryce and watch him play. So I think it's just been fun to like watch a relationship go from like 18 years old, just got to college, but like can still maintain it for 8 years as you like evolve and grow and stuff. So that's just been really special, just like I'd say about any of my friends. But then specifically for them, uniquely was that it was really fun getting to go to all those basketball games and to like support them. And I went to every NCAA tournament game during my 4 years. So that was like maybe one of my more unique memories, because I felt like, yeah, I wanted to go because I liked UNC basketball, but really I wanted to go because like my guys were playing in March Madness and I was going to be there. So like once it was kind of understood that if they left me a ticket, I'd travel there, whether it was, let's see, we went to Kansas City, Jacksonville, LA. We went to Houston, of course. We went to, they had one game in Raleigh. So, I mean, we traveled all over the place to go see them, but that was really fun because there weren't as many students at the March Madness games that were traveling. Like I was sometimes missing class to like travel to Kansas City to go to a tourney game. So when I was there, it was like me and a close group of friends, and it was like their families. So that was really special to kind of feel like I was just like there with the Pages, or like there with Big Herm, Bryce's dad. And like, that's where really the games really mattered. And so those were some of my most special memories, are the March Madness travel weekends.
I thought you were going to go with the late night pickup games in the Dean Dome. That's a cool one.
All right, that's pretty good too. Yeah,
I remember from our friend group, we would get texts like, hey, do you guys want to play pickup tonight in the Dean Dome? And I'd be like, where's my shoes? Racing over there. And then it was
this paper I was going to write. I would love to go play basketball at the Dean Dome tonight.
Yeah, and it was always me or you were just like the most athletic from that group that wasn't Marcus. So whoever wasn't on Marcus's team had the responsibility to guard Marcus. And even if he was going like 50%, like a 50% Marcus is still significantly better than anything we were putting out on.
It's better than two Taylors put together, probably. Yeah, that was fun. But actually, I do remember some times when I did get to play with Mark. I'll give him some shine here. Both in the Dean Dome, like I specifically remember throwing him an alley-oop where he dunked it over Thomas. This was in the practice gym. That was a lot of fun. But also when we were going to Rams, sometimes we'd just go over to Rams and play with other students. So like it wasn't our friend group in the Dean Dome, but it was just random students, and that was really fun. Like, because everyone was trying to give Marcus their best, and usually Marcus wasn't even trying, but every now and then he'd turn it on. And I still remember, I can't remember his name, but there was this like 6'8" guy. I think he might have played club or JV. Really tall guy. He's in there like on the other team. Someone, might have been me, to be honest. Someone on our team shoots a three, like hits off the back of the rim, pops right back up, and then all of a sudden Marcus just comes flying from the 3-point line down the middle and like almost clears that like really tall guy, and almost had this put back dunk where everyone was just like, they didn't know Marcus had ups like that. So yeah, there were these flashes of like, oh, okay, these guys are pretty normal to us, but they're much better athletes than we are.
If people are watching this and saying that they think you have a familiar face, it's because during Marcus and Bryce's playing days, you were on TV almost as much as them because of how often you were front row of Carolina's student section in the risers. If you were coming up with a Ned's Declassified type guide on how to get front row in the Dean Dome for the current Carolina students, what are some tips you would give out?
All right. Multiple paths of getting there, but we had some good friends who were like part of Carolina Fever. So they went to all of the games to get their points. That got them guaranteed phase 1 tickets. And some of them were in like the leadership of Carolina Fever. So they would have like also extras to give out. So I was fortunate to have a lot of friends who were affiliated with Carolina Fever who liked going to games with me and sometimes would help me get a ticket there. Also just like sheer like willingness to wait out in that line. I mean, thank goodness I had friends who like this was like a part of our hanging out. Because some of those games, we'd go down so many hours in advance of a game to be waiting there near the front to be able to rush in and get front row. Like, I remember one year, so dedication is what I'm saying. One year, like in our first year, I think it was the NC State game. It was like a noon game the next day. So like the line was going to start early for a noon game of who was going to get front row. So my friends and I are at Horton. I mean, we can see the Dean Dome from my bedroom window, from my dorm window. And we just decided like at midnight, we were like deciding whether or not we were going to go and hang out with some friends. And we're like, why don't we just go down and just go down right now and just make sure we're front of the line. So we literally slept outside on the pavement outside of the Dean Dome in order to get front row. So those are some extreme stories maybe, but you gotta have good friends and some dedication.
You had the crown of Superfan during your undergrad years, I would say. But would you agree that in recent years, Afro Kid has
Josh,
passed you? Yeah, Afro Kid
yeah,
has passed you
Josh
as the
Mayo.
gold standard.
Josh Mayo, he gets it. He took his. I might have started my time with UNC football when I was like 10. So like I went for a while there, being front row by the tunnel. But Josh Mayo, I think is his name.
Yeah.
He, yeah, he's been doing grad school. I feel like forever. He's like the Perry Ellis of UNC front row riser crew. Yeah, I give him big props. I think, yeah, he's getting another degree just so he can continue to ride out this free front row.
The fact that he has the afro too it's a huge distinction, because it's just so easy to point him out whenever you see him. And every time I see him, I'm like, oh my God, he's still here. He was there when we were there. But
Perfect for the cameras. I feel
like
like he was our crew's
he's getting a
protege.
doctorate degree.
Yeah, I feel like he was our like friend group's protege there, and then now he's in the Hall of Fame. He's
first ballot. He's a first ballot Hall of
Fame. It's been in good hands for a while.
After your freshman year at Carolina, you went to Zimbabwe that summer to volunteer with Hoops for Hope, a basketball nonprofit for kids in disadvantaged communities. What was that experience like?
The best. I mean, yeah, I was really fortunate that all 4 summers, like the summer before at coach's camp, and then all the 3 summers after, I was able to have these awesome basketball experiences. And yeah, after that first year, I went to Zimbabwe. I lived there for just over 2 months with this organization called Hoops for Hope. They use basketball as a vehicle to teach life skills like gender equality and conflict resolution and HIV/AIDS awareness and responsibility, integrity, Ubuntu. They talk a lot about Ubuntu. This African philosophy. I am because you are. It's all about the group rather than the individual. And they teach all of those principles, and they're there for the kids. Like those courts in those communities where soccer is usually most popular, but in the communities where Hoops for Hope operates, all the kids are on the basketball court, and like the coaches there are there for them right after they get out of school until after sundown. So my time there was just amazing. Spent coaching kids and helping out the nonprofit as I can, and developing all these relationships with coaches and their families who live in the same communities. So I just like developed this whole second home and second family in Zimbabwe, and felt like I learned a lot more from them and like received a lot more from them than I could have given like in my summer volunteering as a 19-year-old. So it was really important for me to figure out a way to like go back and do more and like rebuild a court or to spread the word about them. So yeah, that first summer was transformational in a lot of ways, of me thinking about how sports could be used for social impact and as a vehicle for social change. And they were the driving factor of really that like drove me into filmmaking too.
Yeah, going to Africa, it obviously inspired your first documentary, Hoops Africa, Ubuntu Matters. What can you tell people about that documentary and why they should check it out?
Yeah, so I mean, a follow up from my last answer is that I had this host little brother named Watita. I lived with a family there, and so I lived with them the whole summer. First time I had a little brother, so I was usually the youngest of 3, and then I had 3 younger siblings that summer. But the oldest, Watita, he was a great basketball player, a great student. He loved UNC, probably mostly because I brought them all UNC stuff when I went. But he had dreams of making it to the U.S. for like high school or college if he could get a scholarship to come for school and also to play basketball. And he was a good enough player and a good enough student, I thought, to do that, but he just didn't have the opportunity, didn't have the exposure. So my first goal was like, how do I get Watita noticed? How do I make sure that he has everything in line to where he can like academically be eligible to come? And how can I make sure that coaches at prep schools and boarding schools and then colleges like know about him and think about maybe recruiting him? So that was like my first, maybe the first inspiration behind the film. And then the second was like this organization, I gained so much from my time volunteering with this organization. So how can I actually try to do something to impact them? How can I help raise awareness, raise funds, connect them with the right people in the basketball world that I'm starting to get to know through UNC and through working at an agency and working at the NBA? Like, how can I connect all these dots? But you can't get all that many eyes on a nonprofit promo or on like a recruiting video. So I had this idea of like, what if I weaved all these stories together? The NBA in 2015, the summer I was working there, held the first ever Africa game, the first time a U.S. professional sports league held a game on African soil. And while they were there, like some of the top NBA players came to play in the game. but they also were doing a clinic for like the top prospects, young prospects across the continent of Africa. And my little bro Watita was selected for that. And the nonprofit Hoops for Hope was selected to come there and teach life skills, to do some for like local kids there in South Africa. So all of a sudden I was like, I had all these storylines coalesce, and I realized they need to be captured. Like this needs to be a documentary, not just a nonprofit video, not just a recruiting video. I need to like tell a really holistic story of the NBA's growth and basketball's growth on the continent, and weave together these NBA storylines with Hoops for Hope, kind of cementing Watita and Hoops for Hope into like NBA lore, all through this context of Ubuntu. So yeah, I mean, people should watch it just to learn more about Hoops for Hope, learn about Watita's like really inspiring story. You'll get a behind the scenes look at the first ever Africa game. We have a lot of legends in there. Hakeem Olajuwon narrates, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Paul, Luol Deng, Serge Ibaka, Adam Silver, Paul Pierce, Doc Rivers. These are all guys who are in the film. So there's a lot of star power in it, and it's an uplifting story that's about a lot more than basketball.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the basketball legends, because I was going to mention some of those guys. Did you have anyone in particular or any one moment stand out where you were sitting across from somebody being like, I can't believe this is happening right now?
I mean, a lot of that. I mean, I'll tell a few stories there. Is like, one is I really wanted Hakeem Olajuwon was the first NBA player to come from Africa. So I really wanted him in the film. We were honoring the legends who paved the way for all this growth. But he lives in London, and he's been out of the game for a while. But I tracked down, just knocking on doors, man. I was calling the Rockets, trying to figure out if they had contact for him, if they would still do press inquiries. Finally, I got through to someone who said, well, you can talk to his old manager or assistant, but I don't know if she still works for him. It's been a long time since he played, but talk to this older woman, Pamela, and she like doesn't really do stuff for him anymore, but of course keeps in touch. And it just took like literally a year of like checking in with her and trying to figure it out, to where all of a sudden one day she was like, hey, Hakeem agreed to narrate the film. And I was like, okay, awesome. Like, is he coming to Houston? Like, when are we talking? And she's like, yeah, he's free tomorrow. He's in London. And I just had to figure out how to make this happen, like how to hire someone locally there in London to record the audio. And I was on a Skype kind of like talking to them. And so that was like a big one where I was like, dang, Hakeem Olajuwon's narrating the film. Adam Silver too. Like I had met Adam Silver a time or two, working at the NBA. And when I was doing this film, I like wanted to let him know about it. I wanted to ask if he'd be willing to be in it. So I just, shot my shot there and emailed him. And like immediately he emailed back saying like, sounds like a great project. I'd love to be a part of it. So then like going back to interview him, and after having worked there and he's the big boss, it was pretty cool to like realize like, oh, he like knows about me and the project and is willing to support, be a part of it. So that one was a really cool one. And then the other one, I'll give a North Carolina shout out to Chris Paul. So Chris Paul was on like in the Africa game, it was Team World versus Team Africa, like all African players versus like an all-star team of players from across the world. So Chris, CP3 was the captain of Team World. And right after the game, we had like on-court media availability, and we were going to try to sneak in a couple interviews for the film like during that time. So we like rushed with everyone else, all the other media like ESPN and all, big time news organizations are there. And we're trying to talk to Chris. And he's like got all these people in front of him like waiting to talk. Like probably all of them were going to interview him at once. But he noticed me, and we had met a time or two before in North Carolina in different occasions. And he noticed me kind of like all by myself, like behind him, like I didn't get there in time. And he was like, hold on 1 second. And he turned around and did our interview first.
Wow.
Like right after the Africa game on court, like kind of like gave a little wink and then went back to the, to the big leagues. So for us, it was just me and one other person with a camera. I was still in college. That was before my senior year. And this is my first time making a film. So like stuff like that along the way really, on one hand, I was like, I can't believe that just happened. But on the other hand, those things started happening enough to where I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing. I don't need to doubt myself, and I should keep going with it.
What would you say the hardest part was about making a documentary?
Well, I mean, one thing you got to figure out is how to fund it. That's like not my real answer, but like you got to figure out how to fund it. I didn't have any financial backing. I'd never done it before. I had done some videos in college and high school and stuff, but I didn't have like a body of work to show. So I like give a lot of credit to the UNC community, because the week before graduation, I held a like very rough cut, like a screening at the Varsity Theater on Franklin Street with like a very early version of like the footage we had like started to edit. We were not anywhere near done. And we did a crowdfunding campaign and raised like close to $15,000 to like, right when I was graduating, I was deciding not to take the full-time job at the NBA. I was like not seeking a full-time job. I was like betting on myself and just trying to do this independent film thing. And we didn't really have any money for it. So that was huge. But that was like continued to be a difficult thing. It's just like believing in the project enough to be kind of going out on a limb and doing it. But then the other thing I think is just like, there's a lot of responsibility as a storyteller, as a documentarian in that sense of like telling someone else's story, especially like me. Like this is an African basketball story. I'm a white kid from small town North Carolina, but I want to best tell the stories of everyone in the film and want to do it justice because I've like been there in Zimbabwe and know how great Hoops for Hope is, and I love Watita, my little bro, and he's such a great kid, and all these other legends who paved the way and all the work that the NBA is doing, like deserves its highlight. So I think for me, I was just constantly wanting to make sure I was telling the story properly and doing it justice. So on the other side of it now, I feel like I did that to the best of my ability, and that feels really good because in the meantime, I'm sure this resonates with you too. Like in the meantime, you just want to make sure you get the story right.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you are putting out a video, how many times are you watching it before you actually put it out? Because you're putting out full length documentaries, docu-series. I'm putting out like 2-minute videos and I'm watching them like 50 times. And there's more, it's like, once I finish it, it's more like anxiety, like, is it good? And then once I finish it, I'm like, okay, that's it. I can't watch anymore. And it's just like a relief that it's done. But what's that like pre-release process like where you're just constantly watching it and looking for any way you could make it possibly better?
Yeah, I mean, the post-production process, the editing process can be pretty long and grueling and sometimes super meticulous, or sometimes you have a big idea and it's kind of abstract and it's a lot to keep in your head of like, how do you rearrange these puzzle pieces and still make it work? So when you're done with it or when you're nearing completion, you've seen it so many times. Like, exactly, I mean, every little thing. I've almost memorized the interviews of like Brian Scalabrine and Paul Pierce and Serge Ibaka and Luol Deng, like all these guys. I can hear their voices in my head even when you click pause. So, but fortunately, so there is some of that, like where it's like I need a little bit of separation from this. I've been in it so deep. But fortunately for me, like we really had an intentional effort of having a lot of like, rather than scoring it like with an original composition in the background, we did a lot of music that we licensed from a lot of artists, mostly like across from Africa. So like if you were listening to a player from Nigeria talk, there might have been a Nigerian artist in the background. Or if you're like looking at Hoops for Hope courts in Zimbabwe, there might be a South African artist. If you're like seeing the NBA play the game in South Africa, there's a South African artist. So I like the music in our film. That always keeps me into it. Like I'm always like, even in this, I've done 100 screenings of it, and I'm always like kind of like bumping my head and dancing to the music. And some of the interviews, like if it's Watita or the Hoops for Hope people, I mean, those are people I really care about. So I just like seeing them on screen. And when it's the players like Brian Scalabrine and Paul Pierce, there's this whole Celtics storyline of the Celtics being taught the philosophy of Ubuntu by the nonprofit. And they made it their mantra for the 2008 season when they won the championship. Like it was like they broke down every huddle with Ubuntu. They put Ubuntu on their championship ring when they won. So anyways, we interviewed a lot of the Celtics folks, and Brian Scalabrine is such a character, and Paul Pierce is really funny too. So whenever I watch their interview and like the way that we edited it, them going back and forth telling this funny story, I'm like always laughing and enjoying like the audience laughing and stuff. So yeah, fortunately, I like the film enough to where I can still watch it, but some separation is needed at times.
You followed Hoops Africa with Hoop Portraits, and the pilot episode, Two Ways to the League, is about two players with North Carolina ties, and Tyshawn Alexander from Charlotte and Josh Hall from Durham. That was done in partnership with the NBA and the NBA G League. People could check it out on YouTube. How did that idea kind of come to fruition?
So that was a documentary project that we got going here in the past year, actually during the pandemic. So like if we look back a year ago, things were looking really bad, and all of the projects I had, I mean, so much of my work is international, or I'm flying all over the place. So everything was kind of shut down. A lot of our plans were derailed. But so I was looking for some close to home stories. I was doing a lot of remote production work, so I was able to stay busy, but from a documentary standpoint, I was trying to find some close to home stories that were in our backyard that would only be a couple people we'd be working with, that I could have a crew of only me and one or two others to, maybe be able to safely do it. And that's when I found out that Josh Hall, who's from Durham, he was committed to NC State, but actually decommitted, decided to go straight prep to pro. He and Tyshawn Alexander, a 3-year player from Creighton, were training together, living under the same roof, and preparing for the NBA draft. So I thought there was a story there, and kind of showing the different paths that they were taking to get to the same place, hopefully. They were also like on the fringe of getting drafted. So it was like not guaranteed whether or not they'd hear their name called on draft night. But here they are for months and months and months, like working towards that one goal, the goal that so many players have their entire lives, is to get drafted. So I thought there'd be some inherent tension that would just remain throughout until the last day, draft night. So that's how that one came to be. We followed them September through November, I guess. And both of them ultimately went, well, I won't spoil it too much, but both of them are in the NBA now, had good rookie years, and they were awesome to work with. And a fun thing too was that their trainer was, and one of their AAU coaches back in the day was Jeff McGinnis, former UNC point guard legend, played in the NBA for a long time, played with LeBron, played with some legends. So Jeff, who's coaching in the Charlotte area, he was their trainer. So he was like a pretty big part of the film too. So every time on a shoot day, he and I were comparing shoes and, rocking UNC gear and stuff. So it was fun to get to know. It was fun to get to know Jeff too. He played a big role in their development.
As someone who loves college basketball and loves Carolina, what are you starting to think of the G League becoming a more and more viable option, where you have guys like Jalen Green and Jonathan Kumonja coming out of this draft looking like easily top 10 picks, and it becoming a more and more realistic possibility?
I mean, I think it's I kind of exist in a lot of different realms there. It's like UNC basketball through and through. I've seen the beauty of college basketball. I've lived that pretty up close and personal. I've worked for the G League. I worked for them a summer when they were the D League, the developmental league, before they rebranded to G League. And since they've become the G League, they've hired me back as a project employee multiple occasions. So I've seen that side of it. I have friends who play overseas, who play in Europe or play elsewhere. So I've kind of seen like a little bit of everything in terms of like what a professional or what a basketball career can look like. And I think that, I think that college basketball is I'm such a, lover of college basketball that I will always have a lot of pride in UNC basketball, and I'll always love March Madness. Like that's one thing that no one else has is March Madness. And for a lot of people, going in and being the big man on campus and playing for a storied program and playing in March Madness and getting a degree is really important. So I think it'll, always remain in that way. But I think it's also a good thing that young people who are some of the very best in the world at what they do have an opportunity to be paid for it off the get-go, or maybe to just be full 24/7 focused on being a pro. So for those super top guys, if they can go straight to the G League, or a different pathway that allows them to be compensated fairly and focused full time on their craft, then I respect that too. That's something that I could have done as an entrepreneur, as a filmmaker, as an artist, or whatever. If something existed there for me to make a good living and to focus on my craft, it would be there for me. So I don't know. We're seeing changes to NIL. We're seeing changes to everything. So I think they'll work themselves out there. But I think my summarized version is I love college basketball. I think there'll always be a place for it. But I'm glad that there are other opportunities for like these top young players.
I don't want to keep you too much longer, so we're going to do rapid fire here.
Oh gosh.
With all-time favorites. Your all-time favorite class at Carolina?
I really loved History of Sport in America by Dr. Matt Andrews, but also our first year seminar with Distro, sports entrepreneurship.
Legendary Distro. All-time favorite bar in Chapel Hill? He's not.
Gotta give it to He's Not Here. My production company is Blue Cup Production, so how could I not say He's Not? I got a Blue Cup in my hand.
Classic. All-time favorite restaurant?
Oh gosh, Cosmic.
Wow.
The amount of burritos I've had at Cosmic.
Wow.
That
was a shocking
burritos
pick.
I've had after Blue Cups. I got to give my love to Cosmic.
That was a shocking pick.
A lot of good picks there. A lot of good picks a lot of good things to choose from, but I'm going Cosmic Cantina.
All-time favorite moment when it comes to Carolina athletics?
Uh, Tough. I think, man, I think that Duke game, our sophomore year when we won, and after the big delay from the snow game, and we had Anthony there, we did the Anthony's Day, that special experience for that kid, and he was in the building. I think that was awesome. Yeah, sophomore year win over Duke was about as fun of an experience as we had.
All-time favorite football player at Carolina?
Shoo. Uh, Julius Peppers. I just grew up loving him so much and watching him on the Panthers, and he grew up nearby where my dad's from. So I'll go with J Pep with an honorable mention for our guy Matt Collins.
I gave you a layup to just mention me. You didn't take it, so.
third place, Steve Vipp. We once had a fat head of you on the wall, so.
And we had some pickup games in Keenan Stadium that I can remember. All-time favorite basketball player. You can't say Marcus or Bryce. I'll put that because I feel like those are 1A, 1B.
Dang. Well, those are usually my answers. I'm gonna be loyal to my friend here and say Joel James from the same class of 2016 forever.
All right, Taylor. Thank you so much for you coming on. Everybody could follow him at tsharp94 on Twitter. Be sure to check out all his films. He's doing great work, and he's always doing it representing UNC. Taylor, appreciate you coming on.
Anytime, Vip. Talk soon.